Hi, I'm Suzanne Despino, and I'm an LPC with the Counseling and Wellness Center of Pittsburgh. Despite the human capacity to survive and adapt, traumatic experiences can alter people's psychological, biological, and social equilibrium to such a degree that the memory of one particular event comes to taint all other experiences, spoiling appreciation of the present. This is a quote from one of my favorite trauma experts, Bissell van der Kolk. Today, I'd like to talk briefly about the effects of childhood trauma. CDC research from 2019 shows more than 60% of American adults have, as children, experienced at least one traumatic event, and this is likely an underestimate. Now, most people have heard the word trauma, but what exactly qualifies as something traumatic? According to the DSM-V, which is the reference book most people in mental health use, trauma includes being exposed to actual or threatened death, severe injury, or sexual violation. And there are two types of traumatic categories. Type 1 is an acute single episode. This may look like surviving a motor vehicle accident, experiencing a natural disaster, such as a tornado or an earthquake, or even being the victim of date rape. Type 2 is chronic or recurring trauma. This looks like repetitive events or ongoing situations where there's no easy option for escape. Examples of this are serving in active war zones, extreme poverty, or living with an abusive partner. Childhood trauma is when either of these types happens during childhood, and it differs significantly because of the developmental stages of the brain. Acute trauma in childhood can be significant, primarily because it's difficult to process something that your brain doesn't even have the ability to understand. Chronic childhood trauma, however, can actually change the way the brain develops, heightening some areas and suppressing others in an attempt to make sense of and survive something terrible. Okay, so let's talk biology for a minute. If you've ever heard of fight or flight, then you've heard of the central nervous system, or the CNS. The CNS tells the brain how to react to a situation. When everything is fine, our parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest side of the CNS, kicks in and says, hey, chill out, digest your food, relax your muscles, take some deep breaths. When we're in this state, our brains are able to function using primarily our logical brain, the part where we weigh pros and cons, make lists, or consider alternative ways of doing things. But when we're in danger, the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight side of the CNS, kicks in and tells our brain, get ready to literally run away or fight something. Our body gives us these superpowers by heightening our ability to defend ourselves. We might feel our heartbeat increase and our breathing become faster as our body pumps more oxygen. We might feel our fingers and toes get tingly as blood is focused on our central organs, or see more sharply due to our dilated pupils. These are signs that our sympathetic nervous system is working, and when we're in this state, our emotional brain is running the show. So we're more impulsive, we act on instinct, and tend to be more aggressive. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that this isn't supposed to be sustainable. In order for our bodies to attain homeostasis, or balance, we have to escape the danger and allow our parasympathetic nervous system to kick in and return our bodies to baseline. When we can't, we exhaust our system. So let's go back to chronic childhood trauma. Imagine that not only are we a child experiencing chronic trauma, but we're also developing our brains and growing physically while our system is in constant overdrive. Ever heard of ADHD? Well, kids who have grown up with chronic childhood trauma are much more likely to have this diagnosis. Coincidence? Well, it's at least something to think about. What we do know is that children who experience ongoing trauma are significantly more likely to develop chronic illness and disease as adults. In fact, in 2013, the top 10 conditions associated with childhood trauma were diabetes, COPD, heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity, cancer, liver disease, gynecologic disorders, STDs, and unintended pregnancies. Not to mention an increased likelihood of anxiety, depression, and changes to your personality. If you've ever heard of the ACEs, You may be familiar with the significant correlation between traumatic events prior to the age of 18 and the likelihood of living a shorter, less healthy life. Why? Well, the simplest answer is coping skills. Most of the time, our go-to for coping is something unhealthy, like overeating, smoking, drinking, unprotected sex, and illicit drug use. None of these things help us live long, healthy lives, but they may help us escape our current life for a moment. So, with all of that said, you may be wondering if there is any hope for those who have dealt with this type of thing. And the answer is yes. With treatment, including positive coping skills, talk therapy, relaxation, and appropriate support, you can decrease the risks. Intervention is the best protective factor.